Tantrika Shaivism, the non-dual, obviously the non-dual tantric tradition that we're drawing from, there's a teaching about the origin of suffering. And it's not that you did something wrong. And it's not that you need to fix your childhood wounds necessarily or reprogram your nervous system, though those things are important and you do need to do those things. But the teaching is actually just much simpler than that, much more radical. For me, it was very, very freeing when I first came across it. And that is that all suffering arises fundamentally from one thing, a case of mistaken identity. And this forgetting of our true nature is what's called anava mala. Anava means atomic or small, and mala means impurity or limitation. So anava mala is the primary contraction of being a separate, incomplete person. It's the deep belief that you are only this individual person, that you are incomplete, that you are not whole. And when you believe this, that you're not complete, that you're not whole, you suffer. You search then endlessly to be completed. You search outside of yourself. When you believe that you are incomplete, you also believe that you're separate. And then that separation, that leads to this fear that I need to protect this fragile, separate self. This is actually pretty much the default of human condition. It's the way so many people live most of the time. And the remedy, according to the tantric tradition, is not to acquire more knowledge about yourself. The remedy is actually direct knowing of yourself, recognition, pratyabhijna. So literally, pratyabhijna means recognition, knowing what you already are and what you always have been. So let's talk a little bit about what Jnana Shakti actually is. In Kashmir Shaivism's framework, then consciousness, which is also known as Shiva, or we could call it awareness or divinity, has the inherent capacity, to know itself. It doesn't need to look outside of itself. It doesn't require a mirror or an external reference point. This self-knowing is Jnana Shakti. So here's what we need to understand, and that is that Jnana Shakti, it's not like receiving information about yourself from outside. You might think of it this way. Right now, you know that you exist, right? You're aware that you're aware. You didn't have to think about your existence to figure that out. That immediate self-knowing is built into awareness itself. You don't have awareness, you are awareness, right? In Sanskrit, this is called swaprakasha, self-luminous, self-revealing. Consciousness doesn't need a mirror. It doesn't need external reference points because it knows itself directly and immediately and intimate. Just like the sun, which illuminates everything while itself, while being light itself. Consciousness knows itself while illuminating all experience. So this is Jnana Shakti, and you have access to it this moment because you are it. So let's look here at what happens. This is a very important part of the teaching. So if the root problem is a case of mistaken identity, forgetting your true nature, then we sort of need this map. We need to understand, how does this forgetting happen when you're contracted? And this is where this map called the 5-layered map, or the 5-leveled map of identity, comes in, where we can look at this map as a source for us. So, and you'll have a picture of this, and it's also in Tantra Illuminated. So layer 1 is the physical body. This is when you believe, I am this body. You look in the mirror and you think, that's me. You look at a picture and you go, that's me. When you're obsessed with how you look, that you're obsessed with your age, you're convinced that your body is sick, or that you're sick, or that your body is broken. It sounds like this: my body is fill in the blank, tired, broken, hurt, whatever. On the other hand, if we're abiding in our true nature, then our relationship with our body is going to sound something like, oh, sensation is arising in this form. I'm experiencing embodiment, but I'm not just this body, right? So we have the physical layer. The second layer of the map is the energy body. This is when we identify with our vitality, with our life force, what yogis call prana. And in our contracted state, it sounds like something like, I don't have enough energy, I'm depleted, I'm burned out. You believe that you are that energy level. But at the level of recognition, it sounds something like, oh, energy is moving through this body mind. I'm noticing the energy arising and subsiding in this body mind as fluctuations, for instance. The third level is the mental emotional body, or the heart mind. This is where a lot of contemporary practitioners live. This is identification with our thoughts, our emotions, our psychological patterns, our identification with our narrative. In the contracted state, this is total fusion. I'm depressed. I'm my trauma. I'm elated, In the liberated experience of it, it's more like, oh, thoughts. I'm aware of the arising of thoughts. I'm aware of the movement of emotions. I'm the space within which these thoughts and emotions appear. The fourth level is sort of this witness conscious level. This is when we identify with the observer of the experience. I am the one watching. So on the surface, you're no longer fused with the content of your experience, but there's a subtle trap at this layer, which is that there's still a subject-object split. It's very subtle. There's a you over here watching that experience over there. The danger of this layer is spiritual bypassing, detachment and avoidance. It's a sense of being disconnected from life. In the more liberated experience, witnessing itself is just another activity of consciousness. There's no separate you doing the witnessing. There's just witnessing happening. And then there's a fifth layer of this map, which is pure consciousness. This is your true nature. This is awareness. There's no subject-object division. There's no observer. There's no observed. There's no inside or outside. It's just consciousness, or awareness, knowing itself as still, silent spaciousness. So it's actually not a state that you can achieve. It's what remains when all of those other layers are seen for what they are. It's what you are when you're not identified with any one of those other layers. So here's the paradox, and this is really critical to understand if you want to grasp this teaching of non-dual tantra. You have to recognize that you're not the body, or the prana, or the emotions, all of that, in order to be the body freely. So the teaching is not to transcend and then reject embodiment. The teaching is actually to recognize I'm not the body. I'm not that I'm just not the body. I'm not only the body. I'm not only my emotions. I'm not only the witness. And then from that recognition, from that freedom, you return, you come back to the body, you come back to everything, you come back into embodiment, you come back into life, but now you're here without contraction. You're without that grip of mistaken identity. So this is the tantric path, that transcendence in service of sacred embodiment. And then this is where another piece comes online, because how do we actually do this? How does this knowing become liberation? And this is really important. It becomes liberation through what's known as discriminative awareness, discernment, or viveka. So it's that our capacity to be able to discern or distinguish the self from the non-self, from what you are from what you're experiencing. So this practice is, what am I identified with right now? Is this what I am, or is this something that's appearing in what I am? Which layer am I identifying with? So we want to be asking that and looking for, where am I identifying here? When you're caught, for instance, in the hatred of your body, when you're convinced that you're exhausted, that's layer 1 and layer 2. When you're completely fused with your anxiety and the story that you're not good enough, that's layer 3, the heart mind. When you're watching yourself and your life from a detached distance, that's that 4th layer. You want to be able to notice and have discernment, which one of these layers am I identifying with? Viveka is the power, the capacity to see this clearly, not judging it, not fixing it, just seeing it, perceiving it as it is. So the seeing in and of itself is liberating. It's when we recognize, oh, I'm identifying with my thoughts right now. That recognition is consciousness knowing itself in contraction. And what happens is that contraction loosens in the light of that knowing because of the recognition. Right? So again, the tantric understanding is that consciousness itself is self-liberating. The moment you see your false identification clearly, that false identification can't maintain that grip. So what we're practicing this month is this. It's that everything we're doing this month is going to serve this knowledge, this jnana, this knowing. Our core practice is a 3-phase meditation that takes you from gross to subtle to causal. We're going to be working with the 3 different verses of the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. So a very important, 3 very, very important dharanas that we're going to be working with to help us recognize our true nature through the upaya of anava upaya, through embodiment, the embodied means. Our supplementary practice this month is going to be a yoga nidra that's actually going to guide you experientially through each one of these 5 layers. So if you didn't get it when I just talked about it here, don't worry at all, because you're going to have a yoga nidra that's going to give you a somatic felt sense of these 5 layers without having to conceptualize them. Our weekly experiments are actually going to train this viveka, this discernment in real time. We're going to be noticing one week when we're identified with our body. We're going to be noticing when we're identifying with our energy. We're going to be noticing when we're identifying with our thoughts and emotions, which, by the way, is probably the key, clincher one. Will be noticed when we're resting just in awareness and recognizing that we are the awareness within which everything arises and subsides. So here's the crux of all of this, and that is that every moment that you spend identified with one of these layers is a moment of unnecessary suffering, not dramatic suffering necessarily, just that sort of background sense of not being enough or that something is missing. But when we recognize, when we know our true nature, that suffering no longer is there. This is the freedom that you'll experience through these practices, not freedom from life, but freedom from living fully embodied in life without the weight, without that burden of our mistaken identity.